Today is the day, guys. Today I am making a video because I'm tired of people spewing out the wrong information and preaching it like it's gospel. Now, years ago, someone figured out that if your level is high enough on a garrison bust, you can run a tank and still output enough damage to get the job done. For more information on that, you can go back and watch my last video entitled, Is the Tank Broken? For a long time, the prominent set that was used was something similar to this. The gear selection is designed to counteract the damage reduction of the tank by using gear that increases your damage percentage. And of course, this set is proven to work just fine. You can see that even though the tank gives you negative 50% damage output, your gear is getting 35% of that back for a net of negative 15. In this video, I'm going to be providing the evidence that shows that a critical set can actually output more damage than the traditional set. So the question is, if this is what I'm going to talk about today, then why am I showing you a video of me in this invasion? Well, it just so happens that this Dread drone has something in common with every other garrison. For a long time, every once in a while, when I was on bus, people would look at my gear set and ask me why I'm wearing a Cabal. To which I would reply, because it does more damage. And consistently, I would get the same response. They'd tell me that garrisons and platforms have a 99% resistance to critical. And I would say, well, that's pretty interesting. Why do I critical it about a third of the time? Well, let's just see what the spellbook shows the garrison stats are. I see 99% resistance to stun and 99% resistance to grapple and splash. However, under the critical resist, it says 100. That's because it's a resistance just like this drone has, or the resistance that you and I can earn on our ships when equipping gear. It just so happens that most Dread NPCs have 100 resistance, just like the garrison. Now, most experienced players in the game know that resistance in the Infinite Black is pretty much garbage. Anyone who's ever tried to build a stun resist set can attest to that. Now, I sped this video up a little bit here, but over the course of the video of me shooting this NPC in a 2-minute span, I think I critical 5 times. Well, folks, I have a whole 29 critical chance. Now, I know people are already saying it doesn't work on garrisons the same way, it's different. So, let's go try some garrisons. But first, I just want to crunch some numbers. Now, these are the two sets that I'm going to be comparing. Now, I know there can be slightly different versions of these sets. Some numbers can fluctuate one way or the other a little bit. But for the most part, one is focused on recovering damage from the tank, and the other one is not worried about that and simply focused on getting as much critical chance as possible. Just to highlight the main points, here's a brief summary of what we're looking at. If you're wondering how I calculated minimum hit, please go back and watch the last video I was talking about. However, I don't think anyone's really disputing that. That's pretty basic, and you can clearly see the warrior set is going to do more damage on regular attacks. Next, let's take a look at our formulas we need to use to calculate our percentage chance of misses, hits, criticals, etc. Now, these formulas have been in dispute, and if you go back and watch my video on roll system, myth or fact, I will establish that the one formula that isn't correct is the miss formula, which all the other formulas are based off of. However, it is extremely close under normal situations where chance to hit and chance of evasion aren't extremely far apart. We're dealing with 40 evasion and I think 60 hit, so this formula will suit us just fine, and I will go on to prove that. I'm not going to do all the algebra for you, but if we punch all the stats of our ships and our garrison into those formulas, this is what we come up with. Now, I know I got some smart numbers people out there right now, and they're saying to themselves, but Gaines, even if you do critical 31% of the time, and I'm not convinced that you do, under normal situations where you just hit your target with the warrior, you're still doing dramatically more damage. And you're right. Let's look at those numbers. So we can get minimum critical simply just by doubling the minimum hit, and we can get the minimum graze by taking 50% of minimum hit. Again, I don't think that's in dispute. Now, I know I'm working in minimum hits rather than average hits or max hits, but in the end, we're going to convert it into damage per second regardless. So whether we do that now or later is really irrelevant. So we can clearly see with the warrior that any damage we land is simply going to be higher. The only thing the critical set has going for it is it should critical 30% of the time. So let's work on calculating our damage per second. So we know, for example, that per unit of time with the critical set, we should critical 31.7% of the time. Now we want to calculate this in seconds, but that's going to be really hard for people to understand. So I'm going to simplify things and take a few extra steps to make sure everyone understands it correctly. And we're going to calculate this in 100 shots. Then from that, we'll convert it to DPS. So if we take 100 shots with the critical set, on average, 12.5 of them will be misses, 31.7 of them will be criticals, 7 of them will be grazes, and 48.8 will be hits. So we multiply each of those by the minimum amount of damage that we're going to get per shot. And of course, we've done the same for the damage set. And here are the results we get. And we can add all those up in each column to get the total minimum amount of damage for each set that we're going to dish out. Now remember, this is over the course of 100 individual shots. And you can already see that we're doing more damage with the critical set.
All the important points seem pretty clear, no? They think they control the galaxy. I disagree. Don't hate the player, hate the game, son.
At this point, we're going to convert this damage into average damage rather than minimum damage. So far, we're assuming that every shot we take is the minimum amount we're going to deal. We can do this by multiplying the number by 1.5. For example, we know that a ship's maximum damage is always twice its minimum damage. If we have a ship that its minimum damage is 50, we know its maximum damage is 100. And just through common sense, we know it's going to average 75. So we simply can get 75 by multiplying 50 by 1.5. Whether we do that at this point in the process or before we add all the individual damage up, the results are the same. Now we can divide by 100 to get average damage per shot. And then we can divide that number by 3 to get average DPS. Now I'd like to point out that both of these sets were calculated with a level 250 ship, as well as the same gun, and I wanted to make sure the hit chance was also the same. I would also like to point out that on lower level ships under around level 150, the warrior is actually better at DPS. But as a ship's level goes up, the critical becomes a larger portion of the damage it's dealing. And that's a result of how the damage formula is written. When you critical, it doubles the amount of level damage you're doing as well as gun damage. But when you increase your damage with gear, it only increases the damage your gun is doing. For more information on that, please go back and watch my video entitled, Is the Tank Broken? That means that as your level goes up, these two numbers are going to get further and further apart. In the case of my ship, I'm level 340, so there's quite a large difference in between the warrior set and the Cabal set. Often one of the responses I get once I explain the numbers to people is that they're a lot more comfortable with the warrior because the damage it outputs is more consistent. And sure, that's a completely rational thought if you're only going to shoot the garrison once. Let me put it to you this way. Let's say we flipped a coin 10 times. What are the odds that we're going to get 7 heads? Not unreasonable. It could happen, right? Well, let's say we flip that same coin 1,000 times. What are the odds that we're going to get heads 700 times? It's not going to happen. Virtually none. The more times you flip that coin, the closer to 50% the result will be. Over the course of a 210-second garrison bust, there's going to be over 950 shots taken by the offensive team. I think we can safely say the appropriate odds will prevail. All right, let's get down to business here. A person can talk all the bullshit they want, but without the appropriate evidence to back up their claims, it's just talk. Now, I know this garrison's only a level 2, but the platforms have 100 resist regardless of whether they're a level 2 or a level 20. However, what does change is the evasion. The evasion on a level 2 platform is 4 rather than 40 on a level 20 garrison. So if you take a look at the critical set I'm using and crunch the numbers just the way I did before, this is the result we can expect to hit when we shoot at these platforms. Now, I didn't cherry pick any bust videos or anything like that. I just marched marched up to one garrison and attacked it just once, and we're going to see what the results are and compare them to what my prediction was. And keep in mind, my ship is level 340. On the initial calculations I did, they were based on level 250 ships. Also, I didn't factor in the 14% critical bump that I get on both the two ships. I added that into this calculation. Also, on the original calculations, I didn't add in advanced weapons garrison perk, which increases the size of your weapon 1 rank. The goal was to keep things simple so people could follow along, and they didn't have a whole lot of effect on the overall outcome. However, for accuracy purposes, I added those into this. I really would like to do a side-by-side comparison of the Warrior versus the Cabal. The bottom line is I just don't have all the plus damage gear to complement the Warrior. I could show you bust videos of me just swapping to a Warrior to show the difference in DPS. However, the difference is pretty subtle with just that change. The more you increase your critical, the more of an impact it has. If there's anyone out there that still has an interest in that and is willing to help, I would be happy to do that video. But for now, I'm going to show you that my calculations are pretty accurate and that the idea that a garrison can't be critical is ridiculous. I just couldn't handle people telling me that you can't critical a garrison anymore. I mean, I've literally been busting garrisons for the last several years in a critical set, watching the criticals scroll across the screen just as they are now. So I'm demonstrating every shot that I take on this garrison, and at the end we'll do the math and find out how it turns out. So if you followed along, guys, and you counted the number of attacks and crunched the numbers, this is what you should have came up with. Feel free to leave a comment or request in the comments.